So who won the War of 1812 and who lost, Lou?
Well, if you ask the British, they won't answer the question because it doesn't register. If you ask the Canadians, there's no question they won. If you ask the Americans, we stood up for our independence and our sovereignty, so we won. So even though the capital was burned and we achieved none of our goals, by the 1820s, the Americans were pretty proud of people like Oliver Hazard Perry and Andrew Jackson. But there's no question whatsoever as to who lost, and that was the Native American population. And one of the themes in the exhibit is to show several maps that show what happened to those Native American tribes after the War of 1812.
Where were those maps? Are they close here?
Yes, here's one.
Okay.
This is dated 1820, and it shows the map of the state of Ohio, and it indicates including the Indian reservations. So here we have a map that by 1820, the Indian lands in northwestern Ohio were now on the market.
Oh yeah, it's got the Black Swamp on there.
Yes, and of course you see various Indian reservations.
Right, so they have it. What year is this map?
This is 1820.
Oh my goodness! So they've already got Sandusky and and all the counties, Henry County and
Yes,
Williams County.
Quite often these.
They don't even have Lucas County up there yet.
No, that doesn't come in until 1835 after the Michigan boundary dispute.
So is that got Sandusky County? Yeah,
Yeah, notice that the boundaries are quite different than they were.
Ottawa,
There's no Ottawa County yet, no Erie County, no Lake County. So this indicates that. And of course, Andrew Jackson in 1830, they passed the Indian Removal Act.
Right.
And so most of the tribes were moved west of the Mississippi. The Wyandots survived here until the early 1840s, and rather tragic, with no Indian reservations, of course, left in Ohio. And then here's another map that we might take a look at. It's sort of like a culmination. This would be a map of the Delaware District from 1824. And it clearly illustrates the Indian reservations in this area. So here's Upper Sandusky, the Wyandotte Reservation. Here we have the Seneca Reserve, the Big Spring Reserve, Ottawa Indian Reserves up on the Maumee.
Okay.
And
What do we got here? Is this Lake Erie?
This is Lake Erie. Here we have Sandusky Bay. Here we have Fremont, where we are right now.
Okay.
The dark areas would indicate lands that have already sold.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, so this is
Look, so they turned it into little big squares and then little squares.
yes. So basically, this is all Congress lands. So each section would be 640 acres.
Oh, it looks like a bingo card, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. So this illustrates, I think, clearly who the losers were. Basically, the War of 1812 was the fourth war for control of the Great Lakes. And it began with the French and Indian War and Pontiac's Rebellion, of course, then followed by the American Revolution, where we have Crawford's defeat in Ohio. Then you have the Indian Wars in the late 1780s, early 1790s, culminating in the Treaty of Greenville, and then the War of 1812. And of course, the Indians allied with the British in the hope that they would be guaranteed a homeland in the Northwest. And of course, the British abandoned them just as they had done in the previous two conflicts. So,
Wow.
and of course, the real hero, in a way, is Tecumseh. If you ask the average person about William Henry Harrison or George Croghan or any of these people, it won't register. You mention Tecumseh, and there's a good chance that they'll know who you're talking about.
Well, I've heard some theories and many theories on this, and one of the theories, one that just came up recently, that he was interred in Oklahoma. The other theory is that he lived, but because he was a wanted terrorist now, that he couldn't really show his face or show his skin or show his limb
I think
anywhere.
he was, of course, we don't know who killed him, but we think pretty much he was killed at the Battle of the Thames. His brother, the Prophet, did survive.
Right, I know he did.
But not, here's an interesting story here, too. If you look at this print right here, at the Battle of the Thames, what we see here is Richard Mentor Johnson killing a large Indian who was assumed to be
Are these
Tecumseh.
the fellow on the horse and the guy,
Yes.
guy in the red? So the guy in the
And,
red's.
that supposedly is Tecumseh. And Richard Menard Johnson ran for the vice presidency
Right.
under Van Buren in 1836. And his campaign slogan was "Rumsey Dumsey, Colonel Johnson killed Tecumseh."
Right, I remember that.
And
true.
that put him right in office. And if you look
It's
up,
like, right, Harrison, when
here's Harrison
you-
in the background, and that's Tippecanoe and Tyler too, of course.
Tippecanoe and Tyler too,
Yeah.
right.
And so he became quite a hero. And the other two prints also illustrate that. Here's a Courier and Ives.
Yeah, isn't it kind of sad in a way that all the early presidents became elected because they were Indian killers or genocidal people?
Well, yeah, Jackson, Richard Menard Johnson, Lewis Cass became Secretary of State, presidential candidate, governor of Michigan.
Right.
President Harrison, of course, became, William Henry Harrison became a president. Duncan MacArthur became governor of Ohio. So many of these people.
Well, even up Lincoln and even past that, it's just sad. It's just sad that really that killing of these people, murdering and genociding of these people was a pathway to
I think one of the big ironies too is here you have Thomas Jefferson, all men are created equal. I mean, this great rhetoric. And who do you think was the guy that really felt that these Indians needed to be moved west of the Mississippi? It was Thomas Jefferson.
Right. It's just
So
how nowadays, I don't know, many Native Americans won't carry a $20 bill because of Jackson's face on there. Okay, so what do we have here?
this is a print of Colonel Johnson's mounted men charging a party of British artillerists and Native Americans at the battle fought near Moravian Town.
Oh, the Moravian Town bad.
Of course, Richard Menard Johnson, that wasn't much of a battle. His troops charged on the right, went right through the British line. The British surrendered. On the left, he led a charge against the Indians that were in a swamp. He was terribly wounded, very badly wounded, and of course, supposedly killed Tecumseh. And obviously, he gets that credit. Here you have a Courier and Ives print from the 1840s, of Richard Menard Johnson killing Tecumseh. So.
The line, they didn't get it. The line that they had was "skin the cat." They wanted his skin, bring me his skin, to prove that he's a...
Well, supposedly, it's very, you read the accounts, and of course, there are people who did take razor strops and everything, and from Tecumseh's skin, but what happened to the body, we don't know. We assume he's buried there.
It said that they hit him in a tree. To the Native American story, is they hit him, they stuffed his body in a tree, dead or alive. I don't know. It might have been dead. Might have been alive. I don't know.
I think he was killed.
Any more? Did we look at this one yet?
This is just a map. This is the Mellish map of Ohio during the War of 1812. And the interesting thing about it, I think, is it shows all the forts and the three routes. The big problem in the War of 1812 in the Northwest was simply this. William Hull, who surrendered Detroit, made it very clear to President Madison and Secretary of War Eustis that Detroit could not be held if the United States did not gain control of Lake Erie, that it could not be supplied. What people don't realize is that Detroit and Malden, the British base, were not self-sustaining in foodstuffs. If you add an army and large numbers of Indians, it compounds the problem.
Right, and there were plenty there.
And there were plenty there, and the Indians, we all think the Indians went out and shot a deer and had a banquet. Well, guess what? They were dependent on the British for
Right,
food.
they were, true.
And
It was
so,
part of the deal, right?
Yeah, so
we'll
of
come
course,
here if you feed us.
Right. The first road, of course, is Hull's road right here up to the rapids and on to Detroit, and the forts that he built. And of course, there's the traditional route, the one that Hull had wanted to follow.
Which is 127 or 27 or 127,
Right,
really.
he
Up.
wanted to go up the Auglaize and down the Maumee. The other route, which became the main route, why this area is so important, would be from Franklinton to Worthington to Delaware to Upper Sandusky to Fort Seneca to Lower Sandusky and on to the Rapids. The interesting thing that most people do not know is that after Harrison's failed campaign, culminating in the Battle at the River Raisin, where Winchester was defeated and surrendered to the Army, the Secretary of War, John Armstrong, wrote to Harrison and said, "You are waging war against the Treasury and the elements. Stop.
Oh, wow.
We will not proceed to Detroit by land. We will build a fleet." That had already been decided. That fleet will gain control of Lake Erie. "We are building ships to transport your army in Cleveland. And so stop calling up the militia."
Right, they took ice sleds across over to Raisin River, when you go to the Raisin River battlefield.
Yes,
Right.
because that took place in January. And so the interesting thing is Fort Meigs was greatly downsized, and the main route became right up through here. This is the old Scioto Sandusky Trail, and of course it's where the Lake Trail intersects. So this is a key strategic spot. And the interesting thing is, the compromise was reached that the Army would depart from the mouth of the Portage River, which is Fulton Street today in Port Clinton. And so those ships, those landing craft, 80 of them, were hauled down to this area, and then some of them were sunk in the Sandusky River during the siege of Fort Stephenson to make sure they wouldn't be captured. After the victory, after Battle of Lake Erie on September 10th, those landing craft and all the heavy supplies were taken to the bay, to the foot of Fulton Street, and dragged across the lake. Governor Isaac Shelby of Kentucky arrived with over 3,000 mounted troops. They built a fence across the peninsula, let the horses loose on the right, and then on the roughly 22nd of September, Oliver Hazard Perry towed the American Army across to Canada. And I think very few people are aware of that. It's sort of the D-Day.
Well, one of the things I like that you mentioned, the battle at River Raisin, and many people call it they just say the River Raisin Massacre, and remember the River Raisin, they stigmatize it as because the Native Americans won it, that it was a massacre, and if they win it, it's called a victory. And
Yes, yeah, and
so
again,
I'm
what
glad
they
you
did to the Indians was no different
Yeah.
than what the Indians did to them, that's right.